Repetition, great.
All right, so we're on page 80. We mentioned last night about dipping your hands 3 times in 3 different buckets, or really 1 time in 3 different buckets. That would be the proper way to say that. We then spoke about the problem with the Sfaradim and the thanking the Ashkenazim for pulling through on this one and letting us make a bracha. So, thank you. Here we're going to have a similar question, but this time it's not about buckets or ponds or troughs or whatever we wanted to say. This time we're talking about dipping your hands in a river, a flowing river. Could you fulfill the mitzvah according to the poskim? And can you fulfill the mitzvah according to the mekubalim? So we're going to have to figure this out right now. Just a follow-up to yesterday and to last week, where Sfaradim, we always follow Maran except for here. It's okay to have exceptions to rules, but then don't stress the rule so much. Don't say that you always follow the rule when it's not so accurate. Sure, there are times where I don't follow Maran. Nobody say anything. What? Hey, Cheva, wake up. Good morning.
Well, we're waiting for an explanation.
There are customs that are older than Maran, and then Maran himself gives proper respect to in his Bet Yosef. I'll give you a great example. The folding of a talit on Shabbat.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
You're not allowed to fold things on Shabbat, especially not in the creases. It's one of the 39 forbidden melachot. Our rabbis then dealt with the question, so what about a talit on Shabbat? Folding a talit on Shabbat. After Shachrit prayers, you want to fold up your talit for next week, if you have a Shabbat talit, or for Sunday morning, if you have one talit that you use the whole week. Shulchan Aruch says you are not allowed to fold your talit on Shabbat. The one who does so is violating the Shabbat. This is the reason why you'll find that Chabadniks or other such people will bundle up their talit into a ball and shove it up on top of the mechitza. This is the halakha. The halakha is that you're not allowed to fold the talit on Shabbat. Okay, that's it. We're over it. So, now let's explain. In the Bet Yosef, Maran's work before he wrote the Shulchan Aruch, his deliberations before the Shulchan Aruch, Maran quotes the Kolbo. The Kolbo is an old book, if I'm not mistaken, from Ashkenaz, one of the early Rishonim in Ashkenaz, who says that folding a talit in Shabbat doesn't violate any prohibition, and he says why, for a different number of reasons. And he says you're allowed to fold a talit in Shabbat. Maran gives this opinion the time of day. He doesn't argue with it. Rather, he sides with a different opinion and says you cannot do it. And so remember what I said yesterday, that Maran says that anything a community did before him, he's not coming to change. And even though his wording there is, if a community says something is forbidden, and I permit it, so they shouldn't permit it because of me, who's we? Mostly Moroccan Jews, who do have the custom to fold the talit. We say that it's not just about things that were prohibited and Maran permitted, but rather even things that we permitted and Maran later came to prohibit. But there are a number of other reasons here. One is, the reason you're folding your talit on Shabbat is not because you're trying to do laundry or anything similar to that, trying to mark the clothing. Rather, you want it to look good for the next time you're going to wear it. And if you keep your talit up crumbled in a ball, I can show you what such a talit looks like. 1 second. I saw someone wearing one on Shabbat. Now this is also old, so that's why it's yellow. But you see how it's wrinkled everywhere?
Yeah.
Because what happens is when you fold up a talit like this, and every week it's in a different place, and you take it out afterwards, that's what it's going to look like.
Right.
Rabbi Mashash, in his Shemesh U'Magen, chief rabbi of Morocco, later the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim, he writes that you're allowed to fold your talit on Shabbat for a number of reasons. One, because we follow the kolbo. We have an ancient tradition following the kolbo. So even though Maran ruled against that opinion, he didn't knock down the opinion. Rather, he chose a different opinion, and we have the right to follow the kolbo so long as we always did. Second, Second, Rav Mashash writes that if we wouldn't do this, if we would not fold the talit immediately, we would actually be causing the talit to look ugly, which would be a desecration of one of Hashem's mitzvot. And therefore, not only is it okay, but it's proper to fold the talit. Then Rav Mashash goes out on a limb. And even though generally he's the one who's saying, don't follow Kabbalah, follow Halacha, Rav Mashash brings the Kabbalistic gun out of his pocket. And he says, you should know that according to that Rizal, I don't know how practical this is for you, depends how you go to sleep at night. According to that Rizal, if you don't fold your clothes or put them away properly when you go to sleep at night, any clothing which is not folded, rather it's crumbled up in a ball, at night collects klipot. What does that mean? Don't ask me. But negative, impure forces. And it's dangerous for a person to wear such clothing the following day unless he shakes out the clothing first from all the klipot and then he wears it. Says the Rav Mashash, why would you want to start sticking your head here in between the Kabbalists having klipot on your clothes, especially when we already have a custom that says that it's okay to do it. And therefore we continue in this minhag. The Chida, Rabbi Chaim Zevir writes, it's a good minhag to keep folding talit. Rav Peretz, when he came from Morocco to Panovich, not a Moroccan yeshiva. Rav Peretz, I'll tell you the truth. Rav Peretz, my Torah comes from Rav Peretz. Rav Peretz made Aliyah from Morocco and was put into Panovich because he was a rabbi's son, meaning it's hard to get in for Sfaradim at that point in time. To Panovich, it was a very exclusive yeshiva, but they let him in. And he heard about this very wealthy yeshiva in Yerushalayim for Sfaradim. Now today the roles have reversed. Panovich is a wealthy yeshiva, and Poat Yosef in Yerushalayim has no money. He said, I want to go to that yeshiva. And so he applied and applied and applied. They accepted him. He was 15 years old, and they accepted him to the highest shiur in the yeshiva. And as you know, like most yeshivas, they're kids, they're high school kids, and whatever age they are, they were very threatened, the kids, by the fact that some new immigrant from Morocco, nonetheless, most of the students then in Poat Yosef were either Iraqis, like Chacham Ovadia, or Mordechai Eliyahu, or Rav Kaduri, or Syrians, like Rav Ezer Atiyah, Rav Hadaya. It was a certain elite in the Sephardic community, and they didn't say, how could this little Moroccan kid make it to the top class? And so they started picking on him. And Rav Peretz decided that he'd rather be in a place with no food than a place where the people are not really have derech eretz. So he left and went back to Panovich. And it's true, Rav Peretz told me that he used to get every day the yeshiva handed out one slice of bread and a glass of tea with no sugar. And they didn't have dorm rooms, the people slept on the benches in the Beit Midrash. That's what they had. That's how he lived. When he got married, he had to borrow an undershirt from his friend so he could have clean clothes when he got married. Rav Pavarsky, the Rosh Shiva, he made him a Sheva Brachot. And Rav Peretz said, I would love to come, but I don't have money to pay the bus fare. Bus fare is like 6 shekels, $2. I don't have money. I can't. My wife and I would love to come, we can't. So Pavarsky also paid for his bus fare. He said, I'd much rather learn here than learn somewhere where the people didn't have derech eretz. So I'm not Panovich was a good place for Rav Peretz. So Rav Peretz came, and he was 15 years old, a little kid compared to the people who've been there forever and ever and ever. Comes Shabbat after Tefillah, and he folds his talit. It's bad enough when you're wearing a talit in a room of like 1,000 people who don't wear talitot because they're not married. Now you're folding it on Shabbat. And Rabbi Dov Pavarsky said, how could you do this? How could you fold talit on Shabbat? Don't you know? Chilul Shabbos. No. And Rabbi Peretz looked at him and he said, my father was a rabbi. My grandfather was a rabbi. And they were all greater rabbis than you. And they folded their talitot on Shabbat. And there's a chidah in this book. Look it up. He says it's okay. And Rav Pavarsky looked it up and came back to him and said, I apologize. You can fold your talit on Shabbat. And he did. And came time for Sukkot. Rav Peretz walks in with a lulav and etrog, like the Sfaradim, wrapped up in gold ribbons and silver ribbons and purple ribbons and yellow ribbons and all kinds of things. And he comes inside, and again, the yeshiva goes quiet. So who's this guy? I came from Morocco with his lulav and etrog. And Rav Pavarsky stopped tefillah. He came to the middle of the room and he said, this is how you do Ze'eli Van Vehu. This is how you respect Hashem properly, by decorating your lulav and etrog like that. That's what he said. Oh Hashem, there were different days once upon a day. And we have rules. So in this rule, for example, we don't follow Maran. You can, if you want, to not fold your talit. You have to deal with the Mashash's other questions. But in this book that I'm planning to come out this year, I'm trying to, as much as possible, figure out when and where we do and don't follow Maran. And if there are exceptions, how often should we use those exceptions? And if we're using this exception too often, can we fairly tell people that we actually follow Maran? Probably would be better to say that we follow Sephardic tradition and not Maran. Sometimes it's Maran, most of the time it is, but sometimes it's not. I'm working on my case.
So it's the normative practice not to fold your tali?
In the mainstream Orthodox world, yes.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, I mean, there are racks of talisim all over the place, and they're usually, people get it folded, and they put it back.
Well, the racks help avoid some wrinkles, because by using a rack, you can just toss it over there. Now you're just going up and down. But,
So people fold them and then put them on the rack.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what I mean.
Most people fold it out of ignorance. They don't know that you can't fold it.
No?
Most rabbis, good rabbis who know halakha, won't protest the fact that you're folding a talit because they know that you have on who to rely. Even Rabbi Yosef, who's diehard, you cannot fold your talit on Shabbat. He then writes at the end in little words. He says, "But someone who does has on who to rely." He goes on to say, "You cannot do it, but someone who does has on who to rely." This is one of those halachot where even though Maran decided one way, in his Bet Yosef, Maran wasn't convinced that this was the only way you could follow the halakha. And so there are exceptions to the Maran rule, but I struggle here with the fact that Sfaradim are so afraid to follow Maran when he says to make blessings. Maran says to make a bracha. So who are you afraid of? Let's say the Kabbalists, the reason. Okay, I get it. But
I think it has to just do with the nature of a Sephardi, the certain amount of humility and anavah.
not so much humility. Sfaradim are a little bit afraid when it comes to saying Hashem's name.
That's humility.
Okay, it could be humility. Not that Ashkenazim are not. Ashkenazim are even better. Ashkenazim never say Hashem's name, even when they're supposed to. Like Shabbat songs. Ashkenazim are always saying, Kel Adon or Kari Bon Olam. So much that people probably think it's spelled with a K. Not a Yud.
I really don't understand that because you're singing as part of Shabbat.
And that should be considered a serious enough use of...
Right.
That's what we say. That's why we say Hashem's name then.
I've brought that up a number of times, and everybody kind of just mumbles and they just don't answer me.
Rav Mashash has a letter where he says he came to Israel. He said it was the first time he met idolaters. He was Moroccan, remember?
They're praying to
He said because they're praying to Kel. He said we pray to El. He said they're praying to Kel. It's the first time he met such people.
What about collard greens?
So you have to. This is really something to take. But on the other hand, by the Ashkenazim, you never have a problem with people cursing with Hashem's name or blessing too much with Hashem's name. Or they're very, very respectful of Hashem's name, and that's a plus to learn from the Ashkenazim. But not that far. I don't agree with that kel. The ein kelokeinu. Why do you have to call it that? It's ein kelohenu. That's what. Now, obviously, when they pray, they don't do it. So then, why are Shabbat songs not considered prayer? That's the question. And it doesn't seem to be that. It doesn't seem to be that all the Ashkenazim don't say Hashem's name. It seems to be the original custom was to say Hashem's name, and as time went on, people kind of got afraid. I mean, they wrote it with Hashem's name, and those authors of the songs, many of them were Ashkenazim. So I don't know where that custom comes from. But Sfaradim in general, when it comes to brachot, they're so afraid to make a bracha. Like for example, there's a bracha that you make when you make kiddush on a certain wine, and then you drink a better wine at the table. Now there are rules. What is better? Is red wine better than white wine? Is dry wine better than sweet wine? Is expensive wine better than cheaper wine? And this causes for many different discussions at the table. But the basic halakha is wine that is better. You, in the middle of the meal, pick up that wine and you say a bracha before you drink it. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam hatov v'hametiv. He who is good and does good. And so the Mishnah Berurah there says, okay, so maybe not this kind of wine, maybe that's not better, maybe it's an argument. The Sfaradim basically come along, not all, basically come along and say, there are so many rules and so many doubts as to when you could really make a bracha, so we never make the bracha of hatov v'hametiv. You defeated the whole point of this discussion. You don't stop making a bracha because you couldn't figure out how to make the bracha. I'm highly critical of when Sfaradim decide to stop making brachot. You just have to learn the rules and decide this is the way you're following it, and that's when you make a bracha.
Take a stand, so to speak.
Yeah, it's not making a shechianu. The Rambam writes, you make a shechianu on this, you make a shechianu on that, you make a shechianu. He gives all kinds of cases. And the Rambam says at the end, V'chol ha'marbeh levarech shechianu, anyone who says Shechianu more often, Harezem Shumach, should be praised. Why? It's a certain, it's a amount of emunah. Hashem gives you good things. Say Shechianu. What's good? Along come the Ashkenazim and say, we don't say Shechianu on most things. Only very expensive things like a suit or this or that. Sfaradim, they're even worse. They never say Shechianu, almost. And here's the question: why? What about the Shechianu? What about the Rambam who says it's good to say Shechianu? Why do there have to be so many doubts? I once bought something and I asked the Rabbi, can I make a Shechianu? He said, let me tell you a story. He said, I had a neighbor upstairs in his apartment building. So I needed to look up something in the Rambam. I didn't have money to own my own set of Rambam. I went up to the neighbor, can I borrow your Rambam for half an hour? And the neighbor said, absolutely not. So he said, he went back downstairs. He said, I couldn't believe it. I can't believe there's a Jew who won't lend me the Rambam to study from. So I'm going to go to the store. I'm going to buy my own Rambam. He said he bought his own Rambam, and he made a Shechianu when he bought the Rambam. He said, why did I make a Shechianu? He said, who freed me from ever having to ask the neighbor upstairs for borrowing a Rambam. So what do you learn from him? There are times where Hashem does good for you. You have to make a Shechianu. Baruch Hashem. My wife and I recently saved up a certain amount of money to buy books in Los Angeles.
Not saying it sometimes is because you cheapen it if you say it too much.
Too much, but then what happens if you never really say it?
True. You got to find the happy medium.
Right? So my wife and I, we saved up money over this last year to buy a certain amount of books. We went to Los Angeles, we bought the books, we came home, so let's make a Shechianu. We waited a long time for these things. Let's make a Shechianu on the books. And what you brought up is a good point. They once asked Rav Shlomo Aviner, I bought a brand new TV. Can I make a Shechianu on it? And Rav Aviner said, no, you should make a Baruch Dayan HaEmet. I said, that's the Chacham Ovadia once said, you bring a TV and you bring a Satan. Now I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm not so quick to condemn everything in the world that's technologically advanced. But really, I'll tell you the truth. It's a person who doesn't have a TV and who does watch the news and, it's a bit. If you have a computer, you don't need that your living room. You know what this room is special about this room? You come to the room, and everything in the room faces the front of the room. Why?
That's where the art.
That's where the Torah is. Yeah. So you know that when you walk into this room, what's the biggest value in this room? What's the most important thing in this room?
Yeah, any 5-year-old can figure that out.
Right?
Right.
You walk into someone's house, all the furniture is facing the TV. So what do you know about this house? The value of this house is the TV. It's okay, you want to have a TV, you have to... But why does everything in the house have to focus on that TV? Why is that the center of the house? That's a question. So you have to have it defined. I'm not telling you everyone's going to go to hell for having a TV. But why does it have to be the value of the house? It's something to think about. I'm just food for thought.
Put a TV here.
Right? People,
When we say Nach Nukorim, yeah.
but a person sometimes has to think about these things properly. By the way, Shechianu, you don't make a Shechianu on leather shoes, for example. You buy a new pair of leather shoes, they're expensive, you don't make Shechianu. Because, someone tell me? It's interesting halakha. Because you had to kill something to make those shoes. And therefore, even though for you it's happy, for someone else it wasn't. And so the mainstream halakha is we would not make Shechianu on leather shoes.
Also leather jacket then.
Could be. Now, I don't know the rules here. I once heard a shiur given from a rabbi who was a posek, so I'm assuming that he knew what he was talking about. I am not an expert in the laws of Shechianu. But it's something to think about. There's a similar halakha. It's a machloket, Ashkenazim and Sfaradim. Like every good machloket. By the Brit Milah. It's a happy moment.
For you.
Right, for us, it's a happy moment. For the baby?
Not so much.
It's not. So do you make a Shechianu at a Brit Milah or not?
I've heard Shechianu. At least among Ashkenazim.
Do you? I don't know. Is it part of the...
Ashkenazim say absolutely not. You cannot make a Shechianu on a Brit. Because the baby's crying. What do you make? Imagine someone's suffering and you're saying a Shechianu. The Sfaradim will say you have to say Shechianu. Because even in the pain, there's good that you have to bless on.
Yeah, I mean, you can make an argument.
Either way.
But according to neurologists, an 8-year-old baby doesn't sense that pain.
So I don't know, he's crying, so he's sensing something.
There's something...
Senses the cold and since his mom's not around anymore and he's sitting on the sandak, or who's this sandak and all that kind of stuff.
So he should cry before the Brit, not right when it happens. Yeah. I don't feel like I need to justify that the Brit doesn't feel bad. I'm sure it feels tough for the baby and he's just too young to let us know about it by the time he can talk.
But it's not like the pain you get like the 13-year-olds.
Okay, I can accept that there's different levels of pain. But in Israel, the Ashkenazim also make a shechina. Because there's a rule in Ashkenazi halakha that most Ashkenazim are not aware of. But in Israel, the rabbis are. Anyone have a Koran siddur? Not art scroll. Art scroll is not a good Jewish siddur. A Koran siddur.
Yeah, I got one at home.
In the Ashkenazi Koran siddur, there are things that in Israel you say. Have you seen that before? Like Ein Keloheinu during the week. You ever seen that?
Yeah.
What else? Sim Shalom, right? At nighttime. There's a rule in Ashkenazi halakha that certain things in Israel, Ashkenazim have to follow the Shulchan Aruch.
Yeah.
Even though in America or outside of Israel they have the right not to, because Rabbi Yosef Karo was the rabbi of Israel. And therefore, even though the Ramah says you don't say En Kalayin every day, Maran says you do. So outside of Israel, Ashkenazim don't say En Kalayin every day, aside from the Kabbalistically inclined ones, such as Hasidim. But I'm saying Hasidim are not real Ashkenazim. Real Ashkenazim are those who follow Nusach Ashkenaz, the laws of Ashkenaz. And in Israel, though, they say En Kalayin.
Wow.
In Israel, and outside of Israel, Ashkenazim will say something called Shalom Rav by Mincha.
Right,
You probably don't know this because you probably would not know that's it. But if you do,
Shalom Rav is part of the service.
in Ashkenazi Siddurim,
Oh, it's not.
Sfaradim don't do it. Hasidim don't do it. Anyone who's Kabbalistic inclined doesn't say Shalom Rav.
Reform and conservative.
Because according to Kabbalah, there's no reason to say Shalom Rav in Mincha and not in. We say Sim Shalom for everything.
25 guitar.
So Maran says that, and in Israel, Ashkenazim don't say Shalom Rav. They say Sim Shalom.
Yeah.
And there are many such halachot. In America, Ashkenazim don't say Baruch Hu after Tefillah, like Sfaradim do. We say Baruch Hu. But in Israel, they do.
So how often do they do Birkat Kohanim, Ashkenazim?
In Israel, every single day.
Every day.
Because Maran says to do. It's a
Sephardim
rule
do, but
that most people don't know.
Ashkenazim?
Yeah.
Ashkenazim do every single day.
Really?
Yeah.
Just any shul?
Yeah, you go
In
off.
Yerushalayim or all of Israel?
I mean, I've prayed in Yerushalayim mostly, but from what I'm aware, everywhere in Israel.
Is it about that you're in the land of Israel, or is it about that you have lived, that you've made your home in the land of Israel?
No, even if you're in Israel visiting, you would follow the rules of Maran in Israel. This push, by the way, was pushed by an Ashkenazi rabbi named Rabbi the Shla, Rabbi Yeshayahu Levi Horowitz. He wrote a book called the Shnei Luchot HaBrit. He was the one who pushed Ashkenazim in Israel to follow Maran. And years and years, like maybe 500 years ago, I don't know how, 400 years ago, I don't know how long ago it was, but not last year. Why was I sharing this with you? So in Israel, at the Brit, Ashkenazim say Shechyan. Outside of Israel, they don't. Similarly, there's an interesting question in Halakha. This has a hashkafa behind it, a deep philosophy behind it. When someone passes away, and they leave their children behind a tremendous fortune. Let's start the question differently.
I see what you're getting at.
What if someone gives a tremendous fortune to their child in their lifetime? They turn my 70th birthday. I want to give you, I don't know,
$2 million.
$2 million. Good, okay. The child has to make a bracha then, called hatov v'hametiv. The same one that you make on the wine, the same bracha you make here. It's like a more, it's a higher version of shechyan. When a person's parent passes away, God forbid, they have to make a baruch dan ha'emet.
Right.
The question is, what happens when those two events coincide? This is most often what happens when a parent passes away, but they leave their child behind an inheritance. That's significant.
But you don't deal with that until, sometime after the death.
Well, it used to be at the same time.
Oh,
It used to be. I mean, it's before lawyers and
Right.
fighting and all those things.
States.
Pretty much people knew what was going to happen. Very often the will contained how the person wanted to be buried. So those were very much
You had to read it.
connected to each other.
So you could say they neutralize one another, you don't say anything.
Any of them, right? You could say that, but that wouldn't happen. Rather, some opinions say you only say Baruch Dan Emet, because how could you make Hatov Emetiv when someone just passed away?
Both.
But Maran writes you say both. You say also Baruch Dan Emet, and also you say Hatov Emetiv. And I once saw Rav Chaim Drukman, who's the Rosh Yeshiva of all the Bnei Akiva yeshivas in Israel. Big Talmid Chacham, Rav Chaim Drukman. Unfortunately, went through a lot of politics in his life. He's a student of Rav Tzvi Huda Kook. I'll tell you, he went through a problem because he was following halakha when it came to conversions, and there was a conversion mafia out to get him, and they got him. They got him, and the first time in history where someone had the chutzpah to say that retroactively they take back someone's conversions. Yes, there's no way. We've never found a place where you can retroactively take away someone's conversion. They're Jewish for 20 years. I was like, oh, the rabbi. That's a crazy thing. It's one of those black stains on modern Jewish
I
history.
think the central Haredim were trying to take away the power for the conversion from the
From
local
him.
municipal rabbis
Right.
in each town.
And now it's backfiring. Now there's a whole problem in Israel with it. That's probably why he came back to the news. In any case, Rav Chaim Bergman is a student of Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook. And he writes in his book, he says, the big question about Yom HaAtzmaut, Israeli Independence Day, is what do you do with the fact that the state of Israel is that what we've been praying for so long, to come home and to have our own government in Israel. And that's great. That's good news. But then you look at the government of Israel and say, is this what I was praying for 2,000
Well,
years?
they looked at themselves and they said that.
Right then,
Because right now they're...
it's a big problem.
Yeah.
And it's especially if you're religious and you say that the amount of, at the best, non-religiousness and at the worst, anti-religiosity that comes out of the state of Israel. So it would beg the question, so why would I celebrate the founding of a state of Israel? Because it's look how much bad has happened. Says Rav Druckmann, that's a flawed hashkafa. It's the same as a person who passes away and leaves behind an inheritance. He says when good and bad coincide, you make both brachot. He said, but there's even a different halakha. And like what you said, almost what you said. The Gemara in Masechet Talmud Yerushalmi. The Talmud Yerushalmi says, Gadol Kiddush Hashem, Mechilul Hashem. Sanctifying God's name, Kiddush Hashem, is greater than desecrating God's name. Hashem. What's the question? Tell me what question do you have on this Talmud?
How is it sanctifying Hashem's name by supporting this kind of crazy government?
No, so not that. That's not the question. That's your own question. It's a good question, though. Rather, why does the Gemara tell it's a new thing? It's like saying, doing a mitzvah is better than doing an aver. I know that. What are you telling me that for? Sanctifying Hashem's name, or the sanctification of Hashem's name
I think it's something
is
that
greater.
takes precedence, like if something's happening at the same time.
Very nice.
Precedence.
Says Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook, this teaches you the sanctification of Hashem's name and the desecration of Hashem's name. When both of them happen together, the sanctification of Hashem's name takes precedence. It takes priority over the desecration. And the mashal that Rav Peretz once gave me, because I asked Rav Peretz what he thought about this. Rav Peretz doesn't like pilpulim, but he gave me the story. He said, there was someone who came to the king and he saw there was a fly on the king's nose. So he wanted to get the fly off the king's nose, so he smacked the fly on the king's nose. And the king got so angry he wanted to kill him. He said, rightfully so. He said, just because there's a fly in the king's nose doesn't mean you smack him in the face. It could mean you shoo away the fly. Or you say, listen, this is the king that we have, and he's got a fly in his nose. But you don't smack the king in the face because he's got a fly in his nose. Said Rav Peretz, Hashem gave us a gift of the state of Israel. He gave us autonomy in our own land. He gave us an army. He gave us a government. So it's not where we want it. There's a fly on this nose. You don't smack Hashem in the face because Hashem gave us a gift that we messed up.
It's also like
Just elect different people.
Mashiach ben David came from the lineage
Of Ruth,
Ruth, who came from
Ammon, Moab.
which were it was like a backwards way of getting Mashiach. If it
David
had
HaMelech.
come directly, the Yetzer Hara would have destroyed it then.
Interesting. So here you have it's a good and bad are not always so black and white. They're not always separate. Sometimes they come in each other.
The evil conceals the good so the good can survive in a way.
The evil. Oh yeah, interesting. That's like you said about Ayin Hara.
If Mashiach had just come in, or someone of a very high level had just established Israel as a really spiritual place and start building the Beit HaMikdash, it would have been.
I'll tell you the reason I'm afraid of that pshat. I know this pshat. The reason I'm afraid of repeating it is because one of the going things in Christian missionaryism is explaining the reason why their Mashiach came from an illegitimate relationship is because Mashiach has to come from a bad place. And I don't, not that I don't agree with the pshat, I don't like to give people any more material that they could try to use against us than they already have. So I try.
There's also a clear lineage to Mashiach, which Yashki does not have.
It's okay, they made it up for him. It's just like, you get forged
make up all
papers.
kinds of things.
He got his own papers. Oh, Hashem. So what I was trying to get from this whole discussion here is that to every rule there's an exception. But we pride ourselves in halakha, not on the exceptions. The exceptions are things we inevitably have to do. Even the Sephardic poskim who take an exception, we don't make the bracha here. They're not happy that you don't make a bracha. Rather, what do they say? That we have no choice. There are rules, and part of our rules are when we're in doubt about a blessing, we don't make it. But we don't pride ourselves on the exceptions. And when you see Judaism that's full of exceptions, everything's an exception, so then it doesn't make sense anymore. Like we spoke about washing our hands, making bracha first. I would love to tell somebody, everywhere in the Torah we make a blessing before we do a mitzvah. That's what our rabbis say. They say, yeah, but except for lighting candles and except for washing your hands. Not by me. You can't get that over me because I make a bracha first on both of those. So I, Baruch Hashem, have the rule. And it's okay if a person has to have exceptions, but we, as much as possible in halakha, like to put things on the same track, on the same rule, on the same principle. That way it makes sense. It's not orderly. It's not confusing. When people try to learn Hebrew. So Hebrew has shorashim, it has roots, it has different tenses, and pretty much everything is a standard system. In English, it's not true. In English, everything's an exception to every rule. Grammar is English is one of the hardest languages to study. And it's maybe some people like that about English, but that's because we speak English. But for someone who comes from a different country trying to study our language, it's very difficult because nothing makes sense. It's kind of like the difference between the metric system and our system over here in America. In the metric system, everything, pretty much you could figure it out based on what it's called and how it works. In America, I mean, how many pounds are, you don't know, good luck, figure it out. How many, there are things you have to...
Furlongs per fortnight.
And certain things just don't make so much sense.
They have their own problems.
But it's just, we as much as possible want things to be in order, that they should make sense. That's what I was telling you yesterday, that the brachot, we have to figure them out, so we do them properly. Let's look here on page 80 at Halakha Mem. Im sichsech yadav, if he rubs his hands or dips his hands, betoch mei nahar, zormim, in the mei, the water of a nahar, a river, zormim, which are flowing, shalosh pamim, 3 times, shehamayim sheichnis elehem yadav, that the water that he put his hands into, bapam hashniya, the second time, Einam hamayim sheichnis elehem yadav b'pam harishona, are not the same water that he stuck his hands in the first time. V'hamayim sheichnis elehem yadav b'pam hashlishit, and the water that he puts his hand in them the third time, Einam hamayim sheichnis elehem yadav b'pam hashniya, are not the same water that he put his hand in the second time. Meaning, I don't know why I hate to write such language. Rather, you dip your hands in the river and that water goes away. And you dip your hands again, it's new water. Every time it's fresh water.
Yeah.
Or any kind of live water source. It doesn't have to be a river. It could be an ocean, it could be a lake, or something that has water that's flowing. It's not a bad point. It's not a bad point. I wonder if he...
It's true, but the water is flowing, but where is the water coming from? Where it's stored? I wonder. It's just having it moving, even though it's not Mayim Chaim count.
That's not a bad point. Because if we're talking about Mayim Chaim, the living water that's flowing because it's a natural source, then the sink doesn't help us. But it seems here the point is not that. The point is that the water, I mean, if you have a bucket of water, you stick your hands in, all that water now has Ruach Ra. But in the sink, if you put your hands in and the water goes down the drain, just like the river, the water goes down the river, it should be the same thing. Okay, I won't give that to you. It could be the same halakha here. That's a good point. If this is the logic behind it, then you're right. A sink should work here also. Yesh omrim, some say, shedino kedin mi sheichnis yadav, shalosh pa'amim. It's like a person who stuck his hand in 3 times, b'mayim acherim, in 3 different waters, like in the halakha right before us. Sheladat HaZohar HaKadosh, that according to the Zohar, en ze mo'il, this does not help, lehasir haruach ra'a ma'al yadav. That it doesn't help to remove the ruach ra'a from your hands, but it does help for praying, for tefillah, for shema. V'yesh omrim shebazeh mo'il hadavar lasir ruach ra'a, and some say that this does get rid of the ruach ra'a ma'al yadav from his hands, afilu l'dat ha'mekubalim, even according to the mekubalim.
Some say. But if it's Mayim Chaim, it's and you have enough dimension, you can call it a mikvah, correct?
Right.
But so if you go to a mikvah and 20 people have jumped in to the mikvah before you,
Can you outdo the purity of the mikvah with the impurity of the people?
yeah.
Not that I know of.
There's enough water flowing in and out to make the whole...
It's not like the Batel B'Shishim where you need 60 times the... Here, just being in the water makes a person tahor.
So that water must not be able to absorb any tumam, and must not be able to absorb any ruach ra. You can't.
So do you have to wash your hands when you leave the mikvah? Only if you touch your body.
Right. Right, if you touch your body. Which is probably what happens, either when you're getting dressed or somewhere along that line.
Pat down the towel or whatever.
Ula halacha, according to halacha, nira, it appears, shim en lo efsharut, if you have no choice, litol ela bofen kazeh, rather, you can only wash this way, in a river 3 times. He told you to have bli bracha, you should not make a bracha. Again, we would disagree. Sha'af bazeh yesh lomar aklal safek brachot la'akel, because even here you could say, safek brachot la'akel. That when you're in doubt as to whether to make a blessing, you shouldn't make the blessing. This is even worse. This is worse than yesterday, because here, according to one opinion, even the Kabbalists agree that this works. Right. So you have another reason to make a bracha. So why would you not make the bracha here? It's a problem. It's a mistake. You understand why this case is better than the other case? In the other cases, everyone agreed that the Mekubalim would not approve of that hand washing. But here you have one opinion that says, definitely according to halakha, this hand washing works 3 times in the river, 3 times in the lake. But some say that even for the Mekubalim that works. So then why would you go so far as to say that you can wash, but not with a bracha?
Have you learned the Rambam in this section?
The Rambam doesn't, it's not so nitpicky about all these details. The Rambam, Maran and the Rambam are similar here. I mean, whatever they say, the Poskim say it's okay, that's what the Rambam is agreeing with as well. Listen, we did see in Kabbalah, and I'll try to help him out. We did see in Kabbalah that specifically he needed a cup. Remember that upper cup, the lower cup? So it could be that according to the Kabbalah, you really still need some kind of cup that you pour from, and that's why he's being strict. But still. Okay, we just have to accept it. That's his opinion, and at least he's consistent throughout his halachot here, that you would not make a bracha on such washing of the hands.
Let's say if you found a coconut shell, you could probably just use that, right?
Probably. If you found a coconut shell.
If you were like in Hawaii.
Today, you don't need coconut. You just look, there's enough litter around the lake. Right. You can just pick it up and use it.
Unfortunately.
I was somewhere, I saw cups and plates and bags of chips. And
Water bag.
81, page 81. This is a topic we mentioned last night.
Right.
We're going to do the top of 81 and the top of 86 because they're connected to each other. Let's do these together. Come, 81 on the top. Maran says, Yud Gimel. Im haya ne'or kol halayla. If a person was awake all night long. Remember last night we mentioned this? Yesh listapek. We should be in doubt. Im tzarich litol yadav shacharit. If he has to wash his hands in the morning. Litpalel, in order to pray. Ulavir ruach am yadav. And to get rid of the ruach ra from his hands. We don't know if he has ruach ra or not. Why is Maran confused about it? He's not confused. Why is Maran unsure? Hare, the nighttime passed, so of course he got a ruach ra.
Well, we said that because the fact that we're sleeping is the quality of the night.
Why is he unclear? What do you say?
Because does ruach attached to you?
Because what?
Does it attach to you
Because
if
of
you
the
don't sleep?
Oh.
Does it attach to you because of the sleep, or does it attach to you because of the night? On page 53, if you remember,
Yeah.
On page 53, we mentioned 5 reasons for washing your hands. One said sleeping specifically, and one said nighttime, even if you didn't sleep. So what's giving you the real chassid? Maran, I don't know. Either way, so I don't know if he has to wash his hands or not. According to one opinion, you would. According to one opinion, you wouldn't. Haga, the Ramah says, I have a note. V'yitlem below bracha, you should wash them, but without a bracha. Why? Why?
Doubt.
This is a classic case of savek brachot la'akel. We don't know whether you should make a bracha or not. According to one opinion, you do. According to one opinion, you don't. Maran does not give us an answer. So, says the Ramah, this is a classic case of when in doubt, don't make the bracha. Do you do the mitzvah? Yes, you wash your hands. But do you make the bracha? No, that's what the Ramah says. That makes sense. Let's look on page 86. I believe that's the next piece of Shulchan Aruch. Oh, there we go. Yud Yad, one hand. Hishkim. If a person wakes up kodem amud hashachar, before dawn, meaning it's still nighttime. When does the day start? There are 2 different opinions. One says that's when you can put on your tzitzit. One says dawn, and the other says sunrise. Those are close, but not the same. So dawn is the earliest that you could be considered day. That's why he uses the dawn. Hishkim kodem amud hashachar. If a person wakes up before dawn, v'natan yadav, and he washes his hands. Yesh listapek, we are in doubt, im tzarich litol yadav, if he must wash his hands, pa'am acheret, another time, kshi'or hayom, when the day begins. Lehavir ruach ra'a shora leyadayim, to get rid of the ruach ra'a which is on his hands. Tell me why.
Because it's still nighttime. So according to one opinion,
according to the opinion that says that nighttime is what gives you the ruach ra'ah, he still experienced nighttime after he washed his hands. According to the opinion that says it was because you slept, he already did his job. Very good. He already did his job. And he got rid of the ruach ra'ah, so why would he wash again in the morning? Haggah, says the Ramah, V'yitlem below bracha, you should wash your hands without a blessing. Again, a classic case of savek brachot la'akel, sabal. We're in doubt as to whether you make a bracha, so you don't. Let's go to the next page. 88. Yashan bayom. If a person sleeps during the day, this is halakha tedvav. If a person sleeps during the day. Yesh lehistapek, we are in doubt as to whether im tzarich la'arot mayim alehem, if a person must pour water on his hands shlosha pa'amim 3 times. Because according to the opinion that says it's the nighttime, it wouldn't have to. But according to the opinion that says it's sleeping, it's not necessarily in the night that you're sleeping, just anytime you sleep. Haga, note, says the Ramah, v'yitlem v'lo bracha. You should make a washing of your hands, but without a bracha.
So what does sleep actually mean? Like if you doze off, is that sleep, or is that you have to really lie down and sleep for a certain amount of time?
If I'm not mistaken, halakha would consider sleep around over 30 minutes about.
Oh, so you could go for 15 minutes, take a nap?
Yeah, count
I want to tell you,
count was 20 minutes, right?
By heart,
Yeah, 18,
I don't have my sources in front of me. By heart, from what I remember from when I was a kid, I cannot tell you now. By heart, I believe the poskim say about 30 minutes, and the mekubalim say anytime you doze off.
So even during the day.
Yeah, even during the day.
Do some Ashkenazim hold that sleep
How
during the
about
day
during
does
the
not
rabbi's
make you?
sermon?
No.
Really?
I wasn't going
Oh.
to ask that one.
I had a Barry, you weren't gonna ask.
What's that?
You know, I saw a joke today. They said a Reform rabbi and an Orthodox rabbi were sitting together, and the Reform rabbi says, men have so much to learn from women. It's a shame that you don't let them sit together like I do. So Orthodox rabbi says, I don't mind them sitting together at all. I just can't have them sleeping together during my speeches. The truth is that people sleep during a rabbi's speeches. It depends how long the rabbi talks. So here, I remember we had a rabbi in yeshiva. He would wake us up when we were sleeping. He said, you have to get up and go wash your hands. You slept for too long. He would actually tell us. That rabbi was a dangerous rabbi. We all wear white shirts in yeshiva. And in yeshiva, they didn't have blackboards. At least not in my day. I don't know what they have today. I wasn't there. They had chalkboards.
If the
And
if the kid was insolent, you should have said to the rabbi, "You speak too long. You ought to wash your hands."
Here, it's his job. He's speaking for 3 hours straight. They have no choice. So they used to write it in yellow chalk. It was terrible. I don't know why they have, but yellow chalk, the powders on the floor, the whole thing. And so this rabbi would, if you slept for too long and he couldn't wake you up by going like that or whatever, he would take the eraser with the yellow chalk and throw it at your shirt. This rabbi was, before he became a rabbi, he was a candidate for Major League Baseball.
Oh, wow.
And
Deadly accuracy when he
and Rabbi Tendler, Alav Shalom, the Rosh Yeshiva, basically this boy moved from his house into the dorms, and there's a halakha that you're not allowed to read somebody else's mail. It's not a halakha. The Cherem of Rabbeinu Gershom, Chardag, Cherem de Rabbeinu Gershom. Rabbeinu Gershom is a famous Ashkenazi rabbi about 1,000 years ago, who made the rule that you can't marry two ladies. Remember that?
Yeah.
Halakha says you can.
Didn't that Gezerah end?
Oh, so the Ashkenazim say that you can not marry two ladies because Rabbeinu Gershom said you can. Sfaradim say you can because we were not Ashkenazim. We didn't know who Rabbeinu Gershom was. We didn't accept his ruling. Rabbeinu Gershom makes it very clear that his ruling has an expiration date, which already expired. Some Ashkenazim claim that the expiration date was either humility or it was reinstituted at that time when it expired. That Rizal, I don't know, doesn't seem to agree. In any case, most of us follow the Cherem de Rabbeinu Gershom as much as possible, aside from certain places like marrying two, things that were the norm in our countries. And therefore you're not allowed to read someone else's mail, according to Rabbeinu Gershom. It's one of the rules. Anyone who does should be excommunicated from the community. A certain privacy rule. Yeah, someone else's mail, period. Unless you can reasonably assume that they would want you to. For example, it could be your wife wants you to check her bills and pay them. So, or whatever, it could be whatever it is.
Kids, even for chinuch, like you shouldn't check.
So Rabbi Tendler had a psak from one of his rebbeim that a principal of a school, their parents and children, are allowed to check their children's mail, or principals can check the students' mail, because their job is to be mechanech. Now, it's an interesting question. How did he get that heter? But it exists. And a person should be very careful when they exercise this, because forget cherem de Rabbeinu Gershom, excommunication of Rabbeinu Gershom. You don't want to be excommunicated from the children. It's something a person has to be very, very careful with when they exercise their right. And normally, if they exercise it at the right places, children will realize that they were busted or they were caught, and they'll appreciate it later in time. But if it's used too much as a control thing, it's a waste of energy because it's not even going to help. So Rabbi Tendler, he would check the boy's mail before it came in, and then he would hand it out. Back in the day, not when I was in yeshiva, back in the day. And he got this letter for this rabbi that said you've been accepted to play. Before he became observant, he was in minor league baseball. He moved his way up in the baseball world, and then he went to yeshiva. And he got accepted. So Rabbi Tendler took the letter and threw it in the garbage.
Oh.
And at his chuppah, this other young rabbi's chuppah, Rabbi Tendler was the rabbi who married him. And he said, I want to tell you that a few years ago you got a letter accepting you to Major League Baseball. And I threw it in the garbage.
I'm asking
I don't think any of you know Rabbi Tendler. He was my Rebbe for a long time. I struggled with him very much because he was as old school Litvish as old school Litvish got. But because he was old school Litvish, it wasn't like a show that he put on. It wasn't like today you have like Rosh Yeshivas. They're trying to walk a walk, talk a talk. They don't really believe it. He was as genuine gets. That's what he really believed. He lived his life in a certain way, and I mean,
like Jews don't play baseball.
He threw out his own children from yeshiva.
Yeah, or grandchildren.
They broke his grandchildren and his own son.
Yeah, wow.
They broke a rule. He said, I don't care if you're my son. There are rules in the yeshiva. I'm throwing you out. He said, I'm going home. I live on campus, so go home. But he threw his own children out of yeshiva and his own grandchildren out of yeshiva. And when you see that, so then you don't get as angry when he throws out someone else's kids from yeshiva. Because this is a person these are his rules. He had a big heart also, different. I remember Rabbi Tendler very often Friday afternoons at the grocery
We
store.
just got his book. His book is.
He would.
From upstate New York, the Tendler?
No, his brother. His brother.
I told you the Tendler story about my friend who
We're
had
recording.
escaped to Czechoslovakia and he didn't speak enough English, so he got thrown out of the yeshiva.
Okay.
When he was it was a Rabbi Tendler when he was, and they met up in Santa Fe, and he was telling a story, and they both realized that was the Rosh Yeshiva.
Oh, really?
And he went through Buddhism and everything, then he came back to Judaism again after struggling.
I heard you told me the story once.
And
There are a few. Tendler is a big name in the Jewish world. So
Wow, that's amazing.
our Rabbi Tendler, I was telling you the story about the boy, the young rabbi. Actually, he was my rabbi. His name was Rabbi Sachs. He hugged Rabbi Tendler, and he said, "Thank you very much." So I would never have understood it then, but I'm very grateful to you now. And this rabbi he joined the staff in Ner Yisrael. He teaches 10th grade in yeshiva. And he's the one that I probably told you. He starts Shemona Esrei with the rest of us at 5 to 8. And at 9:30 he comes up with his tefillin just finishing Shemona Esrei. A big tzaddik, a really special person. I learned by him also when I was in 10th grade. And so what's it about the letters? How do we get here?
I don't know.
Baseball. It wasn't because we're talking about baseball. He was a baseball player. So when he would throw that
Yeah,
That eraser.
yeah.
he made sure the yellow side got in your shirt. And you walk around for the rest of the day with these stripes of yellow and just like, oh, I got hit.
Scarlet letter again.
Yellow letter.
I've been sacked. I've been saxed.
You can't brush it off. This is like poisonous
By
chalk.
sacks.
It's a good thing it wasn't black shirts.
Like a
So-
bumblebee. Well,
I don't have any yellow chalk, don't worry.
So
Yellow
here,
marker there.
Maran is saying that if you sleep during the day for too long. So this rabbi would say, oh, you slept, I counted how long you slept, go wash your hands. He would send us out of the room to wash our hands.
just like a dawn, same washing, same.
Yeah, 3 times, but without a bracha. But the amount of time, I'm going to look into that for you, B'ezrat how long and where I got those sources from.
So it seems like you have so it's just basically like once per 24-hour period that you do the alternating 3. So what about
Yes.
people that wake up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and that sort of thing?
Didn't we do this?
Not really awake. Or maybe I wasn't.
Yeah.
I thought we covered that you don't have to.
I missed that session.
You wash your hands, but
You don't have to say.
not 3, it's not a bracha.
Sure, you got Sarah also.
Oh,
What
so
about
it's
that?
just a
You get half
one.
asleep, you still have
It's just like a right left, and then you're done.
Yeah, but the issue that comes up is like if you wake up at a certain time, you know you're going to get up at a certain time because you have to do something, whatever it is, and you get up like 10 minutes before, and you know you're going to go back to the bed and just
You're gonna
sort of
snooze?
wait until the alarm goes off. Is that considered sleeping when you're in the bed and going back, or do you get up?
So that would depend on how long is sleeping. If I knew my alarm clock was going to ring in 10 minutes, I would lose any sleep that I possibly had left. I feel so bad. Like, oh, it's going to ring.
I throw the clock across the room.
Yeah, that's definitely
use
a rough
alarms.
time.
Have you ever been in hotels where the alarms go off?
Like clockwork, they wake up.
Someone
at
else
the
This is
same
a
time
wake-up call.
every day, because it's internalized.
That's a great question. Probably not. Probably not. But then again, there are 5 other reasons to wash your hands. So if you, let's say, went back to bed and you weren't dressed properly and you touched the part of your body, you would have to wash your hands again.
So enjoy that last.
We're going to get clear, by the way. Towards the end of Siman Dalet, we're actually very, very soon, about 2 or 3 pages from where we're holding right now, in the 90s, we're going to deal with what kind of things you wash for once, what kind of things you wash for 3 times, what kind of things you wash for alternatingly, what kind of things you do one after the next. We're going to make a lot of sense out of all of that, but that's not for right now. So what I wanted to share with you was that we have a few instances where you would wash your hands, but you wouldn't make the bracha, such as staying up all night, or waking up before dawn, or sleeping during the day. This got most people, I know many people take naps during the day, and this halakha would be very nogea, would be very very commonplace. And so, God willing, we will be dealing with these halachot next week.